Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some history. In order to understand where we're going, we have to know where we came from, right? And so we're going to look at the first bank of the United States. We're on the wiki page. I understand that wiki is horribly unreliable. And by horribly, I mean it is biased. It is absolutely biased to the left. It is run by people who are absolutely biased to the left. But this is the things that they say. This is the things that are not going to get me banned on the current platform. And so we're going to stick to what they say here. I'm not going to try to put in a whole lot into it other than what is written here. But we'll see how it turns out. We're going to start at the background because this is a more detailed than the introduction. So in 1791, the Bank of the United States was one of the three major financial innovations proposed and supported by Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury. In addition to the national bank, the other measures were an assumption of state war debts by the government, establishment of a mint, and imposition of a federal excise tax. The goals of Hamilton's three measures were to establish financial order, clarity, and precedence in and of the newly formed United States, establish credit both in country and overseas for the new nation, and resolve the issue of fiat currency issued by the Continental Congress immediately prior to and during the American Revolutionary War. So, in simpler words, Hamilton's four goals were to have the federal government assume the Revolutionary War debts. Let me let him out. Assume the Revolutionary War debts. So they were trying to take over the debts and consolidate them into one location. Pay them off in a timely manner. That's what we all should do, is pay off our debts in a timely manner. Raise money for the new government. Bring in new income so that they could actually run the government. And to establish a national bank and create a common currency. We saw in the last video how not having a common currency wound up biting us in the ass. And this was them trying to fix that before it was a problem. This was one of the first things they did outside of the revolution. The proposal. Let's make sure y'all can see that. All right. According to the plan put before the first session of the first Congress in 1790, so this is right away, Hamilton proposed establishing the initial funding for the first bank of the United States through the sale of $10 million in stock, of which the United States government would purchase the first $2 million. Hamilton, foreseeing the objection that this could not be done since the U.S. government did not have $2 million, proposed that the government purchase the stock using money lent to it. This was probably not the best idea, but it was something to get it going in the right direction. Basing the bank upon speculation is not a good idea. Starting a bank based on the debts that you are putting into the bank is probably not a good idea. And proposed that the government purchase the stock using money lent to it by the bank and to be paid back in 10 equal annual installments. So they had a payment plan. He was foreseeing that we would actually have the money, and he was willing to put it into that. There is some leeway that could be going there. I hate to see the speculation, because the speculation, as we will see through this series, keeps leading us to disaster. We don't need to be overextending ourselves into debt. This was something that was considered necessary, and I'm not trying to rejudge history, but it was overturned as unconstitutional shortly after this. It was allowed to run for its charter, but after its charter it was not renewed. The remaining $8 million in stock would be available to the public, both in the United States and overseas. This again is somewhere that I differ from what they chose to do. I don't think that we should have been bringing in the foreign investments. That tends to give more influence to people than they should have. As a newly formed sovereign nation, we should have been trying to consolidate our power here and our monetary interest here so that then we could go in a position of strength into the world. But they chose differently, and we wound up all right. The chief requirement of these non-government purchases was that 1/4 of the purchase price had to be paid in gold and silver. It was very important to have the actual currency to back your debts. You needed something of value to be able to be traded in the effect that your dollar drops. The remaining balance could be paid in bonds, acceptable scrip, and etc. So they would take promissory notes, they would take investments, but they preferred for 1/4 of it had to be paid in gold or silver. We need the tangible assets to be here and to be centralized in our country. Unlike the Bank of England, the primary function of the bank would be to issue credit to the government in private interest for internal improvements and other economic development, per Hamilton's system of public credit. The business would be involved in, on behalf of the federal government, a depository for collected taxes, making short-term loans to the government to cover real or potential temporary income gaps. We will see some of the income gaps as we go along, but when you are projecting that there will be a return of this because of this, and then something affects the outcome and you get less, then you have a short-term deficiency there. You anticipated to get $1 million, you actually only made 750. There's a $250,000 deficiency there in your projected earnings. Well, this was to cover that. If you, as a government, projected that the taxes coming in would be this, and therefore you based your spending on that, then when there was a shortfall, you needed something to make up for that in the budget. But you were fully intending to pay that back almost immediately. It was a short-term loan. It was not a protracted loan. Serving as a holding site for both incoming and outgoing monies, and was considered highly important but still secondary in nature. Having the centrally located place to hold your reserves is a great thing. Being able to base your currency off of your actual assets and have value in your currency that is controlled by an organization is a good thing, as long as it's done openly, honestly, and freely auditable. Freely auditable. You should be able to go in and look at the books in the federal bank at any point, even as a private citizen. There were other non-negotiable conditions for the establishment of the first Bank of the United States. Among these were that the bank would have a 20-year charter from 1791 to 1811. After that time, it would be up to Congress to renew or deny. They would be the bank, to avoid appearance of impropriety, would be forbidden to buy a government bond. That's circular, right? If the government is buying government bonds, they're not really making money. It's a Ponzi scheme. You buy more bonds to make more money, to buy more bonds to make more money. It just builds on each other. Have a mandatory rotation of directors. Oh boy, that would be nice, right? If we mandated that every year there was somebody new had to be in charge of this, or every 2 years on the outside, somebody new needs to be in charge of this. It does not need to be the same person for 10 years. And neither issue notes nor incur debts beyond its actual capitalization. Now, it's founded on doing that, right? It didn't have that for the government, that $2 million they were borrowing to give to it. Really, they didn't have that, but that was considered a necessary evil. But they were not supposed to incur debts beyond the capitalization. What you actually have in reserve, what has actually been deposited, is what you can actually lend out. Not fractional reserve, but actual fully funded currency. That foreigners, whether overseas or residing in the United States, would be allowed to be First Bank of the United States stockholders, but would not be allowed to vote. I'm not a fan of outside influence being involved in a federal bank. It doesn't matter what the outside influence is. It doesn't matter if it's a private party. It does not matter if it's a government. Nobody outside of the country should be investing in our money. Not in this way. Not the determining of it. That should not be up to anyone else. And that the Secretary of Treasury would be free to remove government deposits, inspect the books, and require statements regarding the bank's condition as frequently as once a week. Like I said, I am very much in favor of the openness. I want it to be able to be audited at any point, and not just by the IRS, but by independent people and independent organizations, so that we can maintain all propriety, be above reproach, to the point where there can be nothing hidden because it is all visible. If you cannot visibly loan money to somebody because it is shady, you should not be able to do it. If you cannot take the money because you do not actually have the gold in reserve, then you should not be able to do it. It should be absolutely transparent. Now, I'm not saying that you or me should be able to walk in and look at the physical gold anytime we so desire. But there should be a process where that can happen. There should be a process where groups can go in and actually audit the physical gold and silver held in reserve to ensure that the government could meet both the current and future demands of government accounts. An additional source of funding was required. For interest payments on the assumed state debts would begin to fall due. Those payments were required. We're not going to get into that. To achieve this, he repeated a suggestion he had made before. Increase the duty on imported spirits, so tax the goods coming in from other places. Raise the excise tax on domestically distilled whiskey and liquors. Now, I don't like limiting that to a single sin tax, but the excise tax is taxing on the point of manufacture, and then you get to sell it. Like, you propose, you know what the value should be, so you pay your taxes on it at the point of manufacture, and then you sell it and you keep all the profits. Now, there can be some disparity there, and the auditing process would be a lot harder in some ways, but it's not completely illogical to do it that way. The way that we do it, where you go to work and you pay taxes on what you earn, your employer pays taxes on what you earn, you put some up for Social Security and Medicare, and then you take your money home, your state takes some of it, and then you go and buy something and you get taxed for what you purchase. Well, the store pays that, but then the store also pays a tax on the profits that they make. And then you're also paying use taxes through your registrations and inspection stickers or whatever it is for y'all. And so there's a wide variety of things, whereas this would be a single point of taxation. It would be easily understood and it would be easily manageable, but it cuts out a large part of people paying taxes, so people feel like it's unfair. Well, I got news for you. Most of the taxes are paid by the 1%. Most of the taxes are paid by the 1%. Everybody's like, eat the rich, but they're the ones paying for your welfare. They're the ones who are actually putting in to the system more than you are. Even if you do pay taxes, it is nowhere near the scale of the manufacturers of the industry. And if they could have that consolidated and keep us from having to pay the taxes, then we would have more money available to spend with them, and they wouldn't have to spend on their gains. That's why I stand where I do on that. I do view taxes as partially necessary. The amount that we do and the way that we do it, I don't like. But I know that roads are necessary and that it will not work by private individuals. If you don't believe that, you have never been inside a chemical plant in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Because every single one of those chemical plants in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, whether it's Exxon, Shell, Norco, Formosa, whoever it happens to be, are responsible for their own roadways in their own plants, and they do not take care of them. They have them, they put them in to get to places, but they are in terrible shape and have been for the entire 30 years that I have experience with them. So to say that a private investor would take care of their own stuff is dumb. You are not going to pay for the road in front of your house. You're just not going to do it. You're going to let it go bad. So we do need taxation. We do need to quit sending it overseas. Take care of our people, build our infrastructure. What our taxes are actually supposed to be for is what we need to actually be using them for. The opposition. Hamilton's bank proposal was faced with widespread resistance from federal opponents of increased federal power. That makes sense. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson and James Madison led the opposition, which claimed that the bank was unconstitutional. and it benefited merchants and investors at the expense of a majority of the population. I find that hard to believe. I don't understand how that is right. Simply because the benefited merchants and investors, because they're the ones actually paying the taxes. I don't understand that. Now, they limited to distilled whiskeys and liquors and incoming stuff. So I think that it should have been on all goods, and we probably would be in a much better place if we had, from the inception of the country, a 2% excise tax on everything manufactured in the country. Make it flat rate, and then it's easily manageable. You have the money guaranteed to come in, and cut out the exceptions. You don't get to file an exception for anything, but you have this flat tax rate that everybody actually pays into. Like most of the Southern members of Congress, Jefferson and Madison opposed the second of the three proposals, establishing an official government mint. That's because they thought that making paper money was unconstitutional, and there's an argument to be made there, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Carrying around all the weight is not a great idea. Holding the gold really makes you more of a target than holding the actual paper bills. They're more easily concealable. They're more easily transportable. Gold is heavy. If you've never worked with gold, gold is heavy. It takes a lot to carry around gold. Silver is not that light. It's not as heavy as gold. But to carry around the weight is big. It's a big deal. And the convenience of the dollars, which can't be marred, or if they are marred, it doesn't affect the price. So if you've got a coin, and it's a gold coin and it's stamped, right? 1 ounce, 24 karat gold, because that's how it has to happen. If you have coins, they have to be stamped with the weight and the purity of the gold. So it says 1 ounce of 24 karat gold, but then a piece of it gets nicked off, then that is no longer 1 ounce. It is less than 1 ounce. Well, just carrying it in your pocket removes some. So after 5 or 10 years, this coin has worn gold off into the pockets of who knows how many people, and now it weighs less than 1 ounce, so it is no longer the full value. Not only that, but you've lost some of the value simply because it wore off in a pocket, and now it's in the pocket. It has no value. It's dust in a pocket that gets cleaned out and washed down the river. So holding the paper money does make sense. I don't believe that it was an unconstitutional thing. I think that the way that we use it, by sending it elsewhere and not using it where it's intended to be, is the unconstitutional part. But they considered it unconstitutional. And this brings in another thing. We're going to get to it in just a second, but the fact that these two people, like, this is James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, right? They're at the founding, and they're saying that this is unconstitutional. But I mean, Hamilton was there at the founding too. There should have been a settled part of this debate. They should have been able to reach a conclusion, because most of the people who were there for the Constitution are still alive. You can go to the source and settle this argument that is being had in the public square, and they don't do it. They don't do it. They just allow it to go away later without ever addressing the issue. The first part of the bill, the concept of the national mint, met with no objection. It was assumed that the second and third part would glide through, and they did in the House and the Senate. But when they swapped them over, they ran into obstacles. They didn't like the changes of each other's things. The establishment of the bank also raised early questions of constitutionality in a new government. Hamilton argued that it was an effective means to utilize the authorized powers of the government implied under the law of the Constitution. Jefferson argued that the bank violated property laws and its relevance to constitutionally authorized powers was weak. Another argument came from Madison, who believed that Congress had not received the power to incorporate a bank or other governmental agency. I find those arguments weak. Despite the fact that these people signed the Constitution, I find that a weak argument. How can you authorize the government for the the continued enforcement of the common good, and then not allow them to create the currency needed to continue the common good. That just doesn't make sense to me. That's not logically consistent. The decision fell on President George Washington. Like, this is still in the very beginning, the first 8 years of actually being a country, right? The first year, really. And then George Washington initially declared that he was hesitant to sign it, but he eventually came around. They argued their point. They got to it. He came around. He said, okay, I believe that this is constitutional. I am going to sign this into law. And it's only around for 20 years. So in 20 years, if we decide not to do it, we don't do it. And that's what happened. After Hamilton left office in 1795, the new Secretary of the Treasury, Oliver Wolcott Jr., informed Congress due to the existing state of government finances, more money was needed. This could be achieved by either selling the government's shares of stock in the bank or raising taxes. He advised the first choice, and they quickly agreed. Hamilton objected, believing that the dividends on the stock had been inviolably pledged for the support of the sinking fund to retire the debt. Hamilton tried to organize opposition, but was unsuccessful. In 1811, the Senate tied on a vote to renew. Vice President George Clinton broke the tie and voted against. Therefore, the bank's charter expired in 1811. We're not going to get into the purchase of the bank by Stephen Girard or any of the other parts of this. I wanted to get to the expiration of the charter. What we've seen right now is that we had, in our first bank, arguments about the constitutionality of it, and that continues today. People still argue about that. I've stated where I felt on that. I feel like we should have a central bank, that we should have a currency. There should be a Federal Reserve that is actually holding the tangible gold and silver to back our dollars. We should be on the gold standard and not the oil petrodollar standard. I do believe that. It is a more stable system. But it's not up to me. I'm just here to try and bring a little bit of enlightenment to something that really gets quite complicated when you dig into it. We're going to do this in pieces so that it's easily digestible. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion. Hopefully this is useful to you. If you like what I'm doing, let me know in the comments down below. Hit the share button, hit the follow button, hit the bells and whistles. Let me know that you like what I'm doing, that we'll continue this. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Till next time, this has been Pitt. I love you. Peace.